All right, can everybody hear me? Good? Cool. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started early in the morning. My name is Eric Porter. I'm a program manager for the ASP .NET team. And this talk is about building phone apps with ASP .NET as your backend. So I'll start off by sort of explaining who I am, because you're like, hey, you're on the ASP .NET team, why are you giving me a talk about phone apps? In November of last year, all the Microsoft employees got these cool new Windows phones. So picked one up, checked it out. I was like, this is pretty cool. I was actually on iPhone before, and I really enjoyed it. But I used Twitter quite a bit, and I went and looked at some of the Twitter apps that were on Windows Phone and was not too impressed, including the official one. It had a lot of cool features, but it didn't feel like something I was used to on my Windows desktop or my iPhone or whatever device I had used in the past. So Nathan Heskew, who is another member of the ASP.NET team, and I said, let's build an app and see how it goes. We're like, it's just a Twitter app. It's pretty simple, right? There's just some web calls and you're done. Turns out there's a lot more to it than that. To actually build a real application takes a lot of work to make sure the user experience is right, make sure it's reliable, which I'm still working on a little bit. We actually released something last night, a new update, and it actually broke for some people, so still working on that part. But we're a semi-popular Twitter app, and yeah, it's called Rowie. That's sort of a live tile that shows if you pay for it, you get push notifications, and this will show how many people have mentioned you or sent you direct messages. The app itself has been downloaded about 10,000 times, which is decent for Windows Phone, and they have about 1,500 people who have paid for it, and by paying for it, again, you get push notifications, but there's a free version as well that everybody else is using that has Microsoft advertising on a few pages. So as we were building this application, there are a few hurdles you go through. If you're doing like a push notification service, there's a few things to learn, a few new concepts. There's, if you're building, you need services to keep track of people and their preferences. We're building this thing called the Nest with the Metro Twit guys to have our app on the phone and their app on the desktop sync, so all of your columns and settings and things like that will stay together. There's analytics. There's all kinds of services that you can do when you have all these cool hardware pieces in your hand now. We need to take advantage of the web that it's connected to. So there are some things that you have to learn, and so I wanted to do this talk to sort of go through those pieces of how you build an app that connects to the web. Just talking to my neighbor even, a lot of people are like, well, I'm just building like a flashlight app or something like that, which my neighbor actually built. And he's like, one, I don't know how to do the web stuff. I just built, Silverlight. He actually does a lot of C++ too as well. And two, he's like, why would I even connect my app to the web? It's just a flashlight app. I'm like, well, a flashlight app you may not want to, but there are even examples of a flashlight app being cool if you connect it to the web. Like say you all are at a concert and you all have this flashlight app. He has some cool strobe effects and stuff on his app when you push it and hold it. Like you could just connect it up and sync all the phones across, an entire concert and stuff, and have them all flash to, the beat of the music or something. So there's even something as simple as that. There are cool ways that you could connect it to the web. So today, this talk is for phone developers. I'm going to mostly talk about Windows Phone, but everything except push notifications will apply to all other platforms, iOS and Android. Web service developers as well. How can you build your services or extend your services that you currently have today to enable your phone apps to talk to them? So we'll talk about push notifications, ASP.NET membership, and that's sort of how it'll all tie together of remembering who people are. And if there's time, I'll get to building custom JSON services and why JSON is sort of the way you should go. So today should leave with, at the end of it, that this is easy and that you can do it. A lot of the people I talk to just don't think they can do it because there's too many concepts. If you do web stuff already, you're going to think, oh, I know how to do it, that's fine. And that's cool. But there are a lot of people that don't sort of understand how to do both the back and front. So we should leave with, it is easy to do. So I'm going to show how you can do it yourself. So I sort of went through some of this already, but this sort of details kind of why do I need these services. If you're not, most of you are probably familiar because you have smartphones, but if you're not, push notifications are a concept that are across all platforms. So Windows Phone, iOS, Android, they all have these. And if you've ever seen a text message or anything like that that shows up at the top of your screen and you can tap it and it takes you into the app, that's one way. Basically, people need to feel like your app is alive. They need to feel like they're connected to it at all times, even when your application is closed. The other reasons are to keep track of user data, but there are bunches of other services, that some of them I listed up here, that make a lot of sense. Yeah, see, I actually got a toast right now for someone that just tweeted something. So I'm like, oh, I want to go back into Twitter now and check it out. Can't because I'm in my talk, but. So the first concept, push notifications. This is the part that will be specific to Windows Phone. The concepts are very similar on Apple push notifications. There are a few differences. But again, there are 3 ways to send notifications. I'm not only going to go into a little bit of depth because there are other talks that go into more depth on push notifications, but I'm going to show you how it works in general. We've got live tiles, which are the cool things that you see when you open up your Windows Phone or now your Windows 8 device. Just these little blocks of stuff, and there's live data coming from different services, just so you don't even have to open the app to see sort of an overview of what's going on, and this helps get your users to come back to your app.
Just real quick.
Yep.
Are the services for push notifications exactly the same for the tablet, as you mentioned, and the phone?
They are not exactly the same.
They're not the same.
Yes. Yep. I would encourage you to go or watch if the sessions has already happened. There are a couple Windows notification service talks where they'll show the details. The concepts overall are the same. There's just some details, I guess, they're a little different. So, yep. And then we've got toast, which I just showed you, and raw messages are sort of here's a couple bytes to tell the app to do something, like you should go poll something else. Most applications don't need this, but this is good. Even in the concept of like Outlook or something like this, if they just send hey, there's new stuff, make sure you go refresh, then the app can do that and it'll be aware. Overall, I'll show sort of a diagram of how it works, but there's just a simple HTTP API, and you pass these big XML blocks. Well, not big, they're pretty small actually. These XML blocks to the push notification service. It supports secure connections, but out of the box, you actually don't have to. So by secure connections, I mean a certificate-based connection. So they have HTTPS, but you can set up your own certificate so that they can know exactly which servers are sending them stuff. And that actually allows you to do unlimited push notifications. By default, the unsecured, without your own certificate way, you get 500 push notifications per user per app per day. So first I'll do just a demo to sort of go through this entire app, and then we'll sort of break it down and walk through all the different pieces. Okay, so first actually, I'm going to show you some of the easy pieces first, and then I'll show you the finished product and we can walk through the actual details that I had to add. I built this app called Yes Man, and this was actually a Hanselman idea. And it's a simple app that you open and you push a button and it gives you words of encouragement for your day through a toast notification. So not a very simple concept, not something I'm going to ship to the App Store or anything like that. Let's see. So really, let's start at the backend service. So in my case, I'm going to start with a new MVC project. And MVC 3 is what I'm going to start with. So you might be saying, hey, I'm at Build, and I just saw Win 8, I saw ASP .NET 4, I saw lots of cool new stuff. I saw Visual Studio 11, you're in Visual Studio 2010 using MVC 3. Why? The point I want to get across is that this all is possible today. So it will continue to get easier as we come out with new versions of everything, but this is all something you can do today. And that's part of the journey we found through Rowie was, we started off with just some shared hosting. We were like, that works fine. We went to a little cloud-based service where we could, have like 2 instances or something. And now we're actually looking at building an Azure service. So you can go through all those different stages. It goes from, barely any cost to more cost. It just depends on what type of business you're running doing these back-end services. So just go ahead and start a regular MVC 3 project. Cool. So now, who is familiar with NuGet? Yes, most? Good. Cool. So I'm going to go in here and manage NuGet packages. And we're going to search for membership service. So Steve Sanderson, another PM on the team, has built this sort of wrapper around ASP.NET membership. And this sort of will give us a way to keep track of users very easily. So this service basically adds a REST API on top of the existing membership service. So if you're already using ASP.NET membership, you can just add this, and it will add a way for other applications to easily access the data. And there's also a Windows Phone package as well, and JavaScript. So lots of good stuff. Cool. So it added a bunch of stuff to my project. The most important one here is this membership service controller. And this sort of gives you methods like who am I currently logged in as, log on, log out, things like that. And the service on the JavaScript and Windows Phone side will sort of keep track of those cookies for you in your app. So you kind of treat it like you do a regular forms-based ASP.NET app today. So that's pretty cool. And all I did was install a package. So let's just go ahead and look at the app. So I took membership in, I built the push notification service part, and let's actually look and see what that is. So there's, again, the membership service controller there. I built a new one called the subscription controller. So what this does is actually keep track of the information about the phone client so I can send push notifications. In fact, I'm going to jump back to my slides real quick. I'm going to jump back and forth quite a few times so we can see the concepts and see them in action and understand what they are. So here's how push notifications work. I'll show sort of this is taken from Thomas Fennell's talk. He's the PM on the dev side for push notifications. And then I'll sort of talk about where Rowie fits into this and how it would work for your app. So you have your app over here on the left. We have these sort of internal services. You can kind of ignore how this works. It sends out a request to the Microsoft push notification service. And the push notification service gets back a channel URI. And this is basically the URL that you can HTTP post to send notifications to the client. So your application does not know any details about any of the devices for privacy concerns. So that's good. So what you do then in your app, once you've gotten this channel URI, you send it over to your service. So this is the service I'm going to show in just a bit of how we built that. And then you actually need to store that, because if you want to send push notifications like on a timer or based off of some condition, you need to have that at all times to send to the Microsoft push notification service. So you will do an HTTP post with that channel URI, and the Microsoft push notification service will then send it to the device based off of the XML that you passed it. So let me back up. So again, this is Rowie on the left. We send out the request to the push notification service. You do this every time the app launches. So just in case they change the channel URI and give you a new one, you need to make sure that your service is always updated. So every time your app loads, you send that channel URI to your service. So this is going to be the YesMan MVC project that we're going to build up here on the right. And then we're going to send the XML payload to the Microsoft notification service, and it's going to send it to the phone. While we're here, so just to make sure I've recapped everything correctly for ASP.NET membership, this is something that keeps track of users for you, roles, profile information, if you're not familiar with it. The package that I installed wraps it, as I mentioned, and this is what we're going to use to keep track of like who purchased our app and things like that. The actual channel URI, we're also going to keep track of per user in membership. Okay, so in the YesMan service, I've called these things keeping track of the users subscriptions. So here we have a subscription controller, and in here we have methods like, I want to get a user by the username, just to understand their channel URI and things like that. This is a third concept that I'll be going through later, and it's sort of how to build your own custom JSON services. This is actually returning JSON to the client. I'll go through why JSON is sort of important. We have the add method here, and this is sort of the thing that I'm going to call every time the phone app launches. This will give me the channel URI and the user to associate it with, because we always need to have the latest push to our service. Remove, in case they actually want to stop using push notification services. This is actually something you must have to have your app certified in the Windows Phone marketplace. You must ask the person first that they want push notifications, and you must give them an option to turn it off. Your app will be rejected if you do not. And here I have a little flag just saying whether they paid or not. Obviously, you're going to have to do something more sophisticated for this. In Windows Phone, they actually you have the concept of trial versus paid. So you have a flag in the app that you can send down. I'm not actually going to go through that in this. And then a send method. So this basically just, it's keeping track of a counter. I'll show you how the app works. And this send method, which is sort of where the meat of this is, and I'll go into this so you can see how it works. This is just a demo, so I have a little 5-second sleep here just to make sure I get out of the app and can actually see it. Actually, sorry, before I jump into the details of how this works, let's just see it work. So it's a pretty simple concept. So I have my service running. I have my app running. So I can do some cool stuff here with the membership web service that I showed you, and I can register. Sign up here as Eric. Yeah, I ran into that earlier. Cool. So then this app actually shows me some interesting things just so I can sort of understand the concept. This actually will be released in the future as open source, so you can get all the source to it. I'll make sure after the talk is done that the source is all available. But I can read and write values to profile and things like that. We basically wrapped all of the membership stuff into this. So you're not actually going to ship any of this in a product, but this is sort of like a nice little page for you to see the concepts and see how they work. So I've already set up a login ahead of time with a really long, weird password for some reason. And so here's the app. So I'm inside the app, and I want you to pump me up, and because I'm having a bad day, I need to hear something good. So we'll just hit that button, and that's going out to the service. The service is then sending out the push notification to the Microsoft push notification service. And I get a little toast saying, "Have a nice day," which is fabulous. I need to have a nice day. Can run it again. Keeping track of the little counter in there that just reads from some array, and I'll show that. It's just super simple. Have a nice smile. That's so nice. So I go through, I have a bunch of those. A concept I wasn't able to get to in this was to check the actual paid flag, but I have some code in there where it'll just knock your socks off that you're so awesome, like if you pay for it, so it's even better. But anyway, so it's very simple. Just send some toast. I'm not going to go through LiveTile in particular, but at its simplest, LiveTile is an image. So I can set a URL in the XML, and it will send it to that tile and set the background. So you can sort of draw whatever you want in your service. In Rowie in particular, we actually used what I'm the PM for on the ASP.NET team, ASP.NET web pages. And just with a few lines of code, I was able to generate basically this particular Rowie logo and then overlay some other images on top of it, like numbers and stuff like that, and draw some text. So we have some APIs that make that extremely simple. If there's time, I'll actually go through Rowie and show you some of our source code. So how does that send method work? So when I hit that button and said, "Pump me up," let's see how that works. So here I've got a method that I'm sort of keeping track of all the subscriptions. And this is, again, just the users that have run the app. And it has stored their channel URI with that in profile. And then I do a search just to say, find me the current user that made the request. And then I've wrapped up sort of this notification service that can send all the different types of XML that I need. And so this will probably be helpful. I'll make sure the source code is available so that you can do this yourself, because there's a little bit of documentation you need to read on like what the format of the XML is to figure it out. So let's go look at that. So this class has some simple methods like send toast. And all this does is set a few flags in this XML document. And then it is called, sort of have a generic method here. And all this does is set up an HTTP request with all the right details. If you have a client certificate in your app, you can pass it there, right here. And then it just calls it, and it sends the data. It gets back a few more tags itself. So it gets back some fields in the headers, notification status, subscription status. These things will report back to you if the Microsoft push notification service was able to send to the device. There's some different status codes they'll send back to say, not found, like you don't have the right channel URI, so they couldn't actually send it to the device. Precondition failed. There's a few different of them that say, hey, I haven't been able to talk to their device for like 30 minutes, so I can't send it now. You should try again later. Things like that. So, and then I wrap it up in a little response here. And then it sends the request. There are also methods, I won't go into too much detail, around updating a tile. And here's what I mentioned before. All you have to do is pass a URL. So this can be any URL. In the case of Rowie, it's actually something that we generate with like how many current mentions and DMs they have, and then we send them off to a cached image. And it sends it. And that's really all there is to it. So let's see. In my case, I do have some code to say if they're free versus paid, send it and call it something different and have different arrays. But these are all sort of implementation details. The main concept is just sending that XML payload to the Microsoft push notifications, and you're done. It's very simple. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What is the best way to send a client cell phone certificate?
Sorry, what?
A certificate.
For what?
So let's say you want to have a secure communication and you want to send a client certificate across to a desktop or a device from your service.
That's a question on its own. This actually, you don't need to for any of this. So there's already a secure channel set up between the phone and the Microsoft push notification service. So the cool part is, and it works the same with Apple stuff too. Basically, there's one TCP, I suppose, I'm not actually sure, connection from the phone to the push notification service. All push notification apps channel through that one connection to save battery life. So there's already a secure connection between the phone and that, but they sort of act as the broker so that you don't have to, or so that they don't have to give up any privacy information. You don't know anything about their phone other than this URL. Let's actually show that URL. So if I go into the app, just a regular app, I log in. This is a long password. So what I've done here is sort of just dumped out my current subscription information, which is just coming again from ASP.NET membership. You can see this funky URL here. This is what is being used to do that HTTP post. In this case, I'm not paid because I'm cheap. And all I have to do is post to this URL with that method that I showed, and that will do the communication for me through that pipe. Yep. So, yep, no problem. So there's a lot of code there. Does that seem complicated, or does it medium, easy, hard? Okay, just curious. Do you have a question? Mm-hmm.
Using it for that, or?
Yes, so the question is, yes, so the question is, if you don't want to use ASP.NET membership, can I still do all this? Yes, for sure. Mostly it's if you have an existing system or if you don't want to write it yourself. In the case of Roe, we actually didn't use membership. But it's because we knew from the start when we started building it that push notifications are a big part of Twitter apps. Like we need to have something for that. So we knew that scale was going to be something that we cared about. We knew control of everything was going to be something we cared about. So for us in particular, we built our own subscription service that's stored in a database, and it'll scale however. In the case of Azure, we're actually going to switch to table storage for all of that. So. Yep, you can definitely, it's just for storage. So this is to show that it's simple to do, to get started. So that's sort of part of my talk is I'm just trying to show that this is easy to do. So you don't have to use it if you don't want to. Let's switch back. So, this is actually sort of related to your question. In the case of I already have an existing system, or I just want to build my own custom system, what's the best way to do that? JSON is the format that I would recommend. It's, I'm pretty sure, the only format you can use on the Apple push notification service. It is the best way to get a small amount of data between your app and your service. A good example is there are analytics systems out there for Windows Phone, but we decided that we only cared about a certain set of things. We wanted to own the data, so we built our own. Basically, every time you run Roe, we keep track of it was run, you rated it, things like that, just to sort of understand user behavior a little bit. So JSON is small. It's the best format for human readability, but it doesn't send much over the wire. So it's a lot smaller than XML. And as you can see from my silly little joke here, that's why you should use it. Lots of other services use it as well. So Twitter itself, they provide an XML service, but they're actually getting rid of it over time. So they use JSON for the most part, and they have huge throughput. Like, I don't even remember what it is. It's like 13 million tweets an hour or something. It's nuts. They push a lot of data. So if other big services are using it, we should probably use it too. It's nice and small. And it works well if you're already doing web stuff with JavaScript. We're at a conference with lots of JavaScript now, so this is a good concept. So if you're building a Metro app, you can have your service talk to that as well. Windows Phone, Metro app, whatever. Yeah, so I sort of showed this a little bit earlier, but this is sort of a simple way to build your own custom service, is just have a controller and an action in MVC that returns JSON. You can do this in any ASP.NET app. So if you're using web forms, you're using what I build, web pages, which is part of Web Matrix. Using WCF Web API makes it very easy to build your own services. This is the way you would do that. Just get your data, send it. We support out of the box actually doing all the encoding from your data, from your model or from your database query or whatever you're doing, to send it out to the client. So the important things to mention about these services, the biggest one is to keep it simple. The reason you're using JSON is because you don't want your phones eating up a lot of data. Data is still, as phones get beefier and beefier on the connection, it matters a little less, but it's still, there's only so much bandwidth that you get on these devices. That originally actually said KISS instead of keep it simple, but I'm trying to teach my son not to say the word stupid, so we're going to just leave it off here. Versioning is something you need to think of up front. It's fairly easy in this concept, because all you have to do is basically put it in a folder, call it 1 or something. You can look at actually the Twitter API and other APIs, and they usually just have /1 or something like that, and /2 for the next version. A lot of people don't upgrade their phone apps. We probably still have a third of Row users are still on the first version from February, earlier this year. So even though it seems like a simple concept and we're all really into smartphones and stuff like that, oh yeah, it says there's a 1, I should upgrade my apps. Not everybody does. So versioning is really important as you roll out new parts of your app, that you can reliably keep your old services working just fine and have your new ones have new functionality. And the last one, well, last couple, are just to think of your data up front, because when you start doing versioning like this and you have separate folders, you're probably still talking to the same database. So you have to make sure that you're building it in a way that doesn't sort of destroy one version or the other. Make everything purely additive. And the last one is, if you're on a device, Windows machine or device, and it doesn't support parsing JSON, which out of the box I don't think Windows Phone does, use JSON.NET. So that's a really good, really fast JSON parser. You can actually go to NuGet in your Windows Phone project and simply just add it and start calling it. And I may, if we have time, I may actually go through some of that. So actually hosting your service, I'll go into that in a second. Let's look at the Windows Phone side. We haven't really looked much there. There's not much to it, so the concepts are pretty simple, and they apply for iOS and Android as well. Let's just take a look, though. So the Yes Man app I had has just a few pages. This home page was when I actually clicked the Pump Me Up button. Yeah, you can't see it, though, so now you can. So all I've done here is when they click the button, I have a little method here that just starts up a new web client, sets up an event for once it's actually done with the request so I can do something. Like if I get back an error, I need to handle it, things like that. And then I point to my service, in this case it's localhost because I'm all just on the same machine, and called download string async. There are a few other methods like upload string async. In the phone, you want to do everything async. I think, in fact, you can't do it synchronously in the phone. You don't want to hold up the UI, part of user experience. So that's really all there is to it. In my case, I wasn't even doing anything with it. In the future, I should show the error. That would be good, if there was one. Jumping back to how the push notification service stuff works specifically on the phone. So this part is specific to Windows Phone. It will be different on iOS and Android. Yep. So all you have to do, it's still pretty simple. All you have to do is say HTTP notification channel dot find and give it a unique name. This name, I believe, needs to be unique per device. Yeah, I believe so. So I've picked yes man. This will go out to the push notification service and get me that channel URI. So if I didn't find the channel, so every time I start the app, I need to find it. Like, this is basically asking this internal service. Let me jump back here. I'll show you exactly what it's doing. La, la, la. Yes. So push client service. So this first step. It's going right here, and it's basically asking that service on the phone, find me that channel. If we don't have it, then create it. New it up. Pretty simple. There are then events. Yeah, go ahead.
Does that call fail if the phone is not connected?
I believe it returns null. I don't think it fails. I can find out for you. Yep. I wrote all the code and I don't remember. So, let's look in Rowie after. If I have enough time, we'll look in Rowie and actually see what it does, because this was sort of a simple sample. Rowie does a few more things. So then I subscribe to particular events. One of them is, while I'm in the app, the channel URI could be changed. So channel URI updated will be fired. And then at that point, I should do what I do when I start the app and send my URI to the service to make sure that I always have the right one when I'm sending push notifications. There's other ones for errors. This one, I believe, is for raw. So if you're receiving raw notifications inside of the app, you would use that. And then you can actually, toast notifications do not display if you're in the app. So you can subscribe to an event, to say when toast happens, because the app actually knows that it happened, fire this event. So I can do my own UI for internally when toast happens. Because toast is still important, but it's not something that needs to fire to show me to run my app, because I'm already in the app. And then we just open the channel. So that will tell the service. That will tell this service right here to go ahead and open that channel and keep it live for the push notification service. So if you're the first app on their phone that does it, it'll actually set up that connection to Microsoft. And then after everything's opened, or it was already open, which is my else here, then save it to the server, which in my case is just another simple HTTP request. There's nothing complicated about setting this stuff up. There's no There are a lot of cool things in the Windows Phone Azure toolkit, which I'll talk about for a few seconds, but I'm not actually going to show. That stuff is, if I want it pre-built and I want it to be in Azure, just give me a template and it'll be done for you. There are more concepts to it to understand. So what I'm trying to show here is just that you can start anywhere. You can do Azure if you're a big application and you know you need just huge scale instantly across the world. But you can start from a $5 or $10 a month shared host as well, just doing this. But again, that's all there is to it. If I switch back to the service, I'll show one other concept, and that's background services. So some of you hardcore coders may laugh at this code a little bit, but this actually just sets up a timer inside of the ASP.NET process to call subscriptions on a timer. So if I want to send something, or if I want to query Twitter, which is what Rowie does every 2 minutes, I can do that here. Just set it up for 2 minutes, give it some code that I want it to call right here, and process it. This won't scale to hundreds of thousands of users. So something like in Windows Azure doing a worker role would be much more suited for this. But for smaller stuff, I mean, Rowie has like 1,500 people, and we run like this, and it works fine. So it depends on what you're doing. One thing that's super important in this code, you'll see in my, well, that's really an info, not a to-do, is you need to make sure that whatever you do, don't let the main thread die. So you need to make sure that you catch any errors that happen and handle them appropriately. If that happens, your app will come up the next time someone hits a service. And in the case of Rowie, we actually have anywhere from 100 to 1,000 people using it at any one time. Someone's always loading it and hitting it, but you want to make sure that if your app dies, well, you want to make sure that it doesn't die, because if it does, then your requests will fail. So it's very important. Let's see. Let's just go back to slides, because I believe that's it for push notifications. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep, totally. So the question is, how does the Microsoft push notification service queue your notifications to send to the device? It depends. So some of them will be queued for you. And this is usually, I believe, if the device has been out of communication more than a half an hour, they will not queue it for you. So there's status codes you get back saying, you should try this again later, because I'm not going to try again. And there are other times when it's like, I'll make sure it gets sent. Don't worry about it. But yes, they do offload basically some of the queuing to you. So you need to build. Mm-hmm. Yes, if I understand your question correctly, does it? So maybe I don't understand your question. Sorry.
So when you do your posts, and if the Microsoft notification services knows that you've been offline for an hour or whatever, and it says, I'm not going to handle this because I don't know when you're going to come back online.
Yep.
At that point in time, the result that comes back to the browser, your post will say, I'm sorry, I'm not going to handle this.
Yes. So you're just confirming, basically. Yes, when you do an HTTP post, it comes back with a status of, I can't do anything with this, do it yourself, again later. Yes, you have to handle it, you have to queue it and say, okay, I'll try it again later. It really depends on your app. We started off in Rowie queuing everything. Problem is, with a Twitter app, Twitter goes down. So you've got 1,500 people requesting every 2 minutes, give me more Twitter stuff, and it's failing. So you're tracking, the errors for that. It all ended up being too much. So if something fails, and a lot of people are in areas that don't have high-speed internet connectivity very well, so you end up building up these huge logs of stuff. In the case of, just sending tile updates and stuff like that, in the case of our app, it didn't matter as much, so we're actually going to switch more towards, if it's really critical that they know, yeah, we'll queue it, but otherwise we're just going to ignore it and say, you're high traffic, you'll probably, get some more tile updates later. Because in the case of tile updates, keeping track of mentions and stuff like that, and us for particular, we keep track of the count still. It's just sending the tile update to give them that final count. So the count might be out of date a little bit, but it won't be wrong. But in the case of toasts, like for DMs and stuff, like you need to queue that stuff up yourself for sure. Yep, so those definitely need to build that. Yep. Yep. Yeah, so your question is it guaranteed between the Microsoft Push notification service and your phone? It is guaranteed to tell you what happened. So if they have a bad connection, no, it won't necessarily get to them, but they'll tell you, hey, we're going to try it again later, or hey, you need to try it yourself again later. You need to tell us later. Sorry, I didn't hear the beginning of that. We won't get anything back. So the question. Yes, that's what your app will get back. Because your app that we're talking about here is this. So the service is sending stuff down to here, and it's trying to send stuff to here. It tries it instantly. So it will come back to your service with a status code. Yep. Yeah, so the question is, should you retry when you get back statuses saying that it's not there? Yeah, so those are still stuff we're exploring with Rowie, actually. Again, coming back to the other question of when should I try to resend again? Something we haven't done yet, but we definitely should, is if there's been a period of time, so like a day or something like that, then we should just can it all and say, we're not going to try to send them again. Because the problem is, we've actually had a couple failures in our service where DMs didn't work toast notifications didn't work for a couple days, and we didn't notice. When you turn that service back on and it works, everyone gets slammed with everything that they had before. And the Microsoft Push notification service won't like that. Your users won't like that. So you should pick, it depends on your app, but you should pick, is it the number of notifications that makes sense? Like no more than 10 get built up? Or is it time-based? It depends on what your app is. In the case of Twitter, it's very fast-moving, so probably a cap on the number would be the right way. Yeah, so so the statement, not the question, is you wish it would actually tell you more information about how they're or why they're disconnected or something like that. Yeah. So I don't work on this team. I can hook you up with the guy that did if you want to give him feedback. I think There are still some things to be desired on managing that stuff, and that's the feedback that all of us should give, so that they can build the right thing. So afterwards, I can hook you up with. Yep. Yep.
Just to confirm, so what you said is that right? Between step 5 and step 6, it's a sequential process, and when you call to step 6, and your service is still waiting there, is that right?
You're talking about this part?
5 and 6.
5 and 6.
Right. So when you
Yeah.
call a notification, 6, send a message. While you're sending the message, I guess your service is waiting there to get a response. Is that right?
Yes. So the question is this part synchronous?
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
And what is the average return time between the two steps?
What is the average time between that? I do not know. It's very fast that we've noticed, because it's either going to be it has a connection or it doesn't. So if it has a connection, it's going to send it. So there are a few situations. It can look and check and be like, there's no connection to the phone. You're screwed. Done. It's connected. I sent it. I didn't get back a confirmation. So they're obviously disconnected. That might take a little longer. But we're talking seconds, not minutes or anything like that. It should be relatively fast. And again, it depends on your throughput of HTTP post connections to their service. In the case of like 1,500 people every 2 minutes, there's no issue. So if you have 10,000 people every 5 seconds, yeah, might be an issue. But in something like that, you're going to want to use Azure so you can scale out. In the case of Twitter, we're actually switching to Azure just for geolocation so that we can have people in different countries have their data closer to them. So, yep.
So the service seems like it should be, in the case of ASP NET, is it dependent, has it any dependencies on the client? Or can you make, so if I have, say, I have 6 apps on the App Store, can I make one service, just one service that have it enabled with notifications for all my 6 apps?
Yes, so the question is, can I have 6 different apps that all use the same service? Absolutely. Yeah, so each client will have their own channel URI. So you're going to need to keep track of the clients. So if you actually have the same user system as well, so you log in once across all those apps, you'll have to actually keep track of this user and this app. If they're all separate authentication systems, it just works. They're just apps that are sending channel URIs to your server. So.
Along with the channel URI, because there may not be any notification, there may not be any, so whatever usually has there. So you just send some other metadata along with that channel URI?
Yeah, it's whatever. Yes, whatever your application needs. Yep, you can just send it, and yeah, if it's an app ID or whatever it is. Yep.
So the push notification, there is a library, that push notification library that basically that provided.
Yes. Yeah.
So with that, I saw that you're using those XML requests, but you're not using that. What were the reasons not? Or is there a reason not use that library? Or?
So are you talking about the Azure library or something else? Gotcha. Yes, I'm honestly not aware of it. So we started this push notification, service about December of last year. So. Per application on the device. Yes. Yep. Channel URIs will be different across all apps. Yep. Let me flip back through and see. I think the only other thing I wanted to talk about was hosting. And again, I've sort of mentioned this throughout, but you can do exactly what we did and go through stages. So if you're a big enterprise, big app, just start on Azure. the Azure Toolkit for phone actually provides support for iOS as well out of the box. And I believe they're going to support Android as well. So you can have one Azure service that sends notifications to all your apps on each device. So lots of cool stuff out there. There's a link at the end of this talk. If you're doing something small like we were, I mean, we started off with 0 users. So we didn't need anything huge. We started off with paying $10 a month to some shared host we were already on. And we shipped it, and it works. And we have background threads and all kinds of stuff in ASP.NET, and it works. And it scales just fine for that small number. And then we actually switched to a sort of small cloud environment that wasn't Azure on the same company, and that works just fine as well. You just have to make sure that your data doesn't care what server's hitting it. That's the only important part. So, push notifications, it sounded like there were some questions, for sure. But for the most part, the concepts of just doing simple HTTP requests is not that hard. We all know how to do that already. It's a few lines of code. Easy concept. Membership, if you want to use that, it's a NuGet package. Install it, keep track of your channel URI, a couple lines of code. If you want to build your own service, we have plenty to do that with. We have MVC, web pages, web forms, WCF, lots of choices, so whatever you'd like to use, it's there. Yep. Yes. Yeah, there we go. So other sessions to check out. This is very focused on native applications, so phone apps that talk to ASP.NET. The other concept is building mobile web apps with ASP.NET. My colleague, Phil Hack, has a talk on that. I'd go to Channel 9 and check it out afterwards. I believe he already did it. Later today, I think later today, I'd have to check the schedule, Thomas Fennell, who's the PM on the dev platform side of Windows Phone, has a talk, and he'll go into more depth on just push notifications for Windows Phone. So if you guys have more questions, that's the session to go to. If you want to learn more, go to the ASP.NET site. We have lots of stuff around, how Rowie built, our actual tile service to generate images. All the concepts are all on that site. That's the place to learn. We have some URLs here for also push notifications, quick starts. That's actually how I got started. I was reading these docs. And the Windows Azure Toolkit for Windows Phone. You should definitely check it out if you're building a high-scale service. We have 2 minutes. Are there any other questions? Yep.
So I have a device that's basically my cloud service.
Mm-hmm.
And it's only capable of sending HTTP without security, so just HTTP, not HTTPS.
Mm-hmm.
Is it possible to do the HTTP post without HTTPS and without customer kit?
1 second. Yes. So you can see my channel URI here is actually not HTTPS.
So you can just dump that in a browser and
You're doing a post to it, but yeah. Yeah, actually, if you wrote a form and you posted to that URL with that, it would work. Yep.
The Microsoft Push Notification Service is run by Microsoft.
Yes.
Is there any charge for us accessing that?
Nope.
So if we're developing, if we work with the live one, or is there a development version for testing that?
Yeah, so the question, just in case no one heard, the Microsoft Push Notification Service is free, and there's no test environment. The test environment really is to have another channel. So you don't have to have the same channel between your debug versus release or whatever version of your phone you have. So no, just use it live. Like Thomas's demo will actually be on the live servers, just like mine was. So, yep. All right. Thank you very much.